everybody, today we're going to be doing a quick guide to Rapid Shot. I'm not normally used to doing quick guides. I normally try to make longer videos going more in depth about things, trying to explain things and get some feedback, but for now we're going to try to do a quick guide to Rapid Shot. What is Rapid Shot? Rapid Shot is a build about shooting a lot of bullets and moving around while doing it. That's the entire intent of this build. It's not meant to be meta. It's meant to be a Path of Exile build, Path of Exile 2 build that continues to play into the endgame, kind of using Path of Exile 2 mechanics and not just devolving down into Path of Exile 1 AoE spam. The best way I can sell this build to you guys is to put the sound effects volumes to maximum and let you understand that this build shoots a lot of bullets very quickly, very loudly. Now, there's a couple of things we're going to go over while we do this. Number one, we're going to go over support gems right here. The support gems for Rapid Shot are not very complicated. Rapid Shot needs to use mobility. Mobility lets us move, which when I go into my passive tree, you'll see why this is actually getting kind of good. We also use Fresh Clip. Fresh Clip, for each bolt reloaded into the weapon, we get 1% more damage for 6 seconds. At level 19, now level 19 abilities are pretty easy to obtain once you're doing tier 15 waystones. That reloads 85% more damage. With the amount of attack speed, we can very easily get this up. Now, of course, the way Rapid Shot works on its own, that will make the attack speed and particularly the Martial Temple really easy to understand here, is if you have no heat, Rapid Shot takes a lot of time to do that first attack. If you do have heat, it does not take a lot of time to do that first attack. You want to get enough attack speed that you can tap the ability without slowing down to continue to keep up your heat so that you can move into each area and gun down people as rapidly as you can. Of course, in order to help do that is Martial Temple. Martial Temple gives us more attack speed. Between Martial Temple, mobility, and Fresh Clip, this is pretty much going to do your entire early game. You don't quite need to make the weapon into an AoE. We don't have actually any AoEs in our build outside of our grenades, which I'll go into later, but actually all our killing of enemies is done with Rapid Shot. Martial Temple, mobility, and Fresh Clip help this out immensely. Later on, in links 4 and 5, you can of course put in Ricochet and Fork. Fork allows you to, well, fork your bullets out of an enemy to hit 2 additional enemies, and Ricochet allows it to bounce off terrain to hit additional people. In the video I hopefully put up in the middle, or sorry, before this, you can see that Fork and Ricochet, especially with the passives I've used, which I'll go into later, work to allow this ability to shoot around corners very easily, keep us safe, keep us mobile. Our first supporting ability here is Oil Grenade. Now, of course, I've tried to keep this build as cheap as I can. I would wager my current items are worth at tops like 7-8 divs. This is not a very intensive build. I will go over the gearing in a little bit. I just make a note to do that really quick here. So I will go over the gearing in a little bit. These items are okay. Of course, we have here a Bombard Crossbow. Bombard Crossbow is why we shoot 2 grenades. I just wanted to go over that really quickly. So for Oil Grenade, we have Exposure because Oil Grenade reduces enemies fire resist by 20. We reduce that by 26% when we have Strip Away, because that makes the exposure 30% more effective. So Oil Grenade is a good way to reduce enemies fire resist. This is good for rares early on, and later on the tankier bosses. We have Magnified Effect, making it do more, well, AoE. We have Persistence to give it more effect duration, and then we have Long Fuse, which while it takes longer to proc, will deal more damage and have much more duration. Now, of course, this means that Oil Grenade is good for setting up kill zones, slowing down enemies that try to get into you, debuffing bosses for long periods of damage, and just generally helping us with a lot of things like rituals. If you are doing a ritual or you are doing a breach, what you will very much want to use Oil Grenade to do is right before you do it, you can set up some oil grenades and then start shooting around, and these oil grenades will slow every enemy around them. You'll very quickly ignite them. Helps your culling, which we'll go into later, and generally just gives you a lot of safety because this build has a lot of safety issues. Up next, we have Emergency Reload. As I mentioned with Fresh Clip, for each thing we've reloaded, we get more damage. If we look then at Rapid Shot, being able to instantly Rapid Shot reload gives us a lot of damage very quickly. Now, of course, remember that heat affects both grenades and the main ability, which is where Gas Grenade comes in. Up against bosses, once we have an Oil Grenade debuffing them, and then we have the boss maybe stunned or something, we can then unleash all our Gas Grenades right here, which will do a massive amount of damage, and Rapid Shot causes grenades to gain their damage as additional heat. or sorry, as additional fire damage per their heat. Gas grenade, then, which we have set up here, it has a longer cooldown recovery time, but it has a 50% chance to activate multiple times. We've got scatter shot, so it shoots 3 instead of 2, but then it shoots 4. You can see it shoots here 4 because of the crossbow we're using. We have fire infusion because I couldn't really think of anything else. Some of these supports could be better. And then we have primal armament, giving it more weapon elemental damage. So because of this, the gas grenade combined with the rapid shot will do an absolute lot of damage. I actually thought I had heft here instead of fire infusion because the ability, yeah, it should have been heft in there. Where did heft go? That's odd. Yeah, I would use heft instead of fire infusion because the rapid shot causes us to gain our damage as fire damage. So we don't want to be gaining more damage. Gaining damage conflicts with us. Gaining base damage, having more base damage means that we're going to gain more total damage. So I would recommend heft instead of fire infusion. I don't know why I'm using it like that. At any rate, that's generally how we're going to do it. So we've got a mobility here. We got, well, the mobility from the rapid shot allows us to shoot while moving. This allows us to play this game more like a top-down shooter, like Helldivers or something like that, and not so much into an AoE spammer. Now, of course, you might be wondering, how do we kill enemies then? How do we clear breaches and things like that? Which is something that I have gone over. I have very much done breaches, pinnacle bosses. I think I could get all the way to maybe... Ooh, +2, maybe +3 Arbiter with some really good gear. Beyond that, I'm not really sure. But at any rate, we can get through the majority of the game here, right up until the hyper mega endgame that most builds can't do. Anyway, now the way we do that is, of course, we have Pitiless Killer, which gives us Culling Strike on every single move by default. Since we are, of course, with rapid shot shooting, right now my build is shooting 27 shots a second. This allows Culling Strike to proc really easily to allow us to finish off enemies and effectively chew through hordes of enemies way easier. Judge, Jury, and Executioner gives us Decimating Strike. Since our build does lack a little bit of scaling, some other builds can kind of scale billions of damage. We can scale millions of damage. At any rate, Decimating Strike allows us to remove health from full health enemies as we shoot them. This again once allows us to clear out hordes of enemies way quicker because we're shooting so many bullets that we're never gonna kind of clip. Other abilities can one-shot all enemies, so Culling Strike and Decimating Strike doesn't really do that much. For our build, it does do a lot. And as we get into the late game, the combination of Fork and Chain allows these Decimating Strike and Culling Strike to hit packs of enemies, and we keep proccing these percent, I'm gonna call it like percent health nukes, that allows us to chew through them very quickly. Over here, we do have, of course, Sorcery Ward. I'll go into that later. It's very underpowered, but we'll explain it. Going down here, you just want to get as much attack speed as possible. Attack speed over here. I do like Backup Plan because it gives us evasion and armor if we haven't been hit recently. This is quite effective for keeping us alive. This build will have survivability issues. Pretty much all builds that aren't Energy Shield have survivability issues, but what we've done is we've kind of gone with a couple of them. I am, of course, level 91. This is all achievable by level 91. Backup Plan gives us armor and evasion rating if we haven't been hit recently. I have stuck with an armor and evasion rating actually item set here. Armor and evasion rating gear is really cheap because armor and evasion rating is really, well, it's weak. It's really weak. Pure evasion is probably better, but armor evasion gear is kind of cheaper. We just went down here, got some damage and chaining off terrain. We grabbed all the two-handed damage nodes down here. We went down here. We got the increased movement speed if we've killed recently, the movement speed if we killed recently, attack speed if we killed recently, and even more movement speed if we've killed recently. This helps us move around, as you might imagine, a lot. I grabbed the jewel right here. Now over here, we went from the chaining from terrain here to get even more chaining from terrain. We did get a chance to pierce an enemy. Now that chance to pierce an enemy is why I did what I did with Oil Grenade. Oil Grenade, once it can pierce through an enemy, doesn't actually proc on the enemy anymore. It gets a 30% chance to pierce through them. That kind of made them really unreliable. Normally Gas Grenade blows up if you shoot it into an enemy. Because I couldn't do that anymore, that's why I decided to turn Gas Grenade into this huge duration rather than just lob it constantly into enemies. That's just something to think about. Now up here, I would recommend skipping this stuff for now. You're going to want a path over here, get more attack speed, blinding enemies on hit. This reduces enemies' accuracy, which means that your evasion is going to work even better. Why is your evasion going to work even better? Because for defense here, we of course have gone with Wind Dancer. We've got Wind Dancer with knockback, Stun threshold. Now people, they're 50-50 on if this actually works. I don't think it works, okay? I don't think Unbreakable works. I was trying it. Bludgeon, Blind, and Pin seem to work pretty decently. These knockback enemies, and then it roots them around you when you get hit. When you're not being hit, Wind Dancer, of course, gives you a crapload more evasion once you have especially some quality on it. That evasion feeds into your Sorcery Ward. Sorcery Ward is based on your evasion and armor. So once, of course, we have here the backup plan and we have the Sorcery Ward, we will be pretty high on the evasion here for a hybrid build. This is pretty high in the evasion, and in addition to that, we will have a very high sorcery ward. Blinding enemies makes our evasion count for even more, and this means that enemies are less likely to hit us. Worth noting, of course, is that rapid shot does technically knock back enemies, and if any people get close, you will rapidly knock them away from you. This build might not seem that survivable without energy shield. No build is right now, but I would say of the non-energy shield builds, this one's probably one of the better ones for at least staying alive. Of course, it does run into the issue that armor evasion doesn't really have any synergy right now. Over here, we got down here, we got the crossbow into the reusable ammunition. That's for the crossbow attacks to have a chance to not consume a bolt. That's because we are shooting so much, we will rapidly consume our entire mana pool if we're not careful. Then I just traveled all the way down here to grab acceleration. That's even more movement speed and skill speed. Skill speed improves your reload time. Attack speed also improves your reload time. Skill speed improves it even further than that. And then of course movement speed is just really good. As we can see here, after we do shoot, we reload very quickly. Some builds have issues with reload. My build certainly has no issues with reload. I went down here to get attack damage, even more movement speed, and then maim on hit. Any enemy we shoot will be slowed. This helps you massively in campaign before enemies are super fast, and even on the way, once you get to the maps, this will help you before you get a high damage crossbow. You'll easily be able to kite out enemies and walk away from them. Between your movement speed and the fact they're going to be slowed, you're going to be easily able to play this like a top-down shooter and kite enemies out. I went over here and grabbed Catalysis. Now I did do this later. It's important to get over here, but I did grab Catalysis. This because it converts physical damage you take to a random element. Because your sorcery ward is this big, after you do get hit, the sorcery ward will go down to about 3,000, a more reasonable number. But basically, this does mean if you get hit, that damage will convert into elemental damage, which will then be blocked by your sorcery ward, which also helps your armor. As meager as it is, it will help your armor block a little bit more damage. So Catalysis is effectively 5% less physical damage taken, which you very much will need this because you will die horribly. And then we grabbed another jewel down here. And this of course is elemental damage, which is the majority of our damage. Up here, I did grab escape velocity later, but for now, it's something worth looking at. It's more evasion rating and, you guessed it, movement speed. Now these are how we actually start to AoE. This is, we get a 25% chance, then a 75% chance to have an additional projectile fork. So when we shoot an enemy, this fork gem right here, instead of forking into 2 shots, will fork into 3 different shots. That combined with Ricochet will allow us, that's why you see all these bullets bouncing into enemies and clearing out entire packs of enemies. One thing I will note as we are talking about this, Ricochet and Fork do work on bosses so long as there is a wall. If there's not a wall, they don't work on bosses. You're gonna have to figure out damaging gems. I'd recommend maybe Heft. Heft is pretty good. Then of course down here we went Dex, attack speed, attack speed, attack speed, and then we got Falcon Technique. That's 1% increased attack speed per 15 dexterity. With my build right now, we are sitting at 200 dexterity, so that's about, what is that, like 14% attack speed, so that one's pretty good right there. Between all these things, we have a lot of movement speed and we have a lot of attack speed. This build will of course need to rely very heavily on kiting out enemies, not being hit, strafing ranged attacks so you can dodge through them, and of course on bosses you have to constantly be going into their back so that they don't just slam you in the front. You do have a little bit of armor, so you kind of get, I'd wager like a mere 5 to 10% damage reduction from a boss hit. It's not going to be much, but it'll probably keep you a little bit alive. You have evasion to stay alive from there, and as long as you're not being hit and you're keeping the Wind Dancer up and you're keeping your what is this thing called here, backup plan up, you will stay pretty survivable. Now after you've kind of gotten through the early game and you're at tier 15 maps and things like that, one thing I had to do was I had to go over here and grab the fire penetration over here, the fire penetration over here, and then I grabbed this. This is an increased chance to ignite and an increased damage with hits against burning enemies. If you can't the main way we have here to proc the oil grenades is to shoot this, and eventually enemies will ignite. If you can't find a way to ignite that, I would very much recommend just put 1 point in advanced munitions for now. Don't sprint all the way over here, just put 1 point in advanced munitions. You'll remove it later. But for now, it's a pretty good way to make sure that you proc the ignite. For more survivability, we went down here to leather-bound gauntlets, which is actually a lot more than you'd think, and general bindings, which is a lot less than you'd think. I also grabbed polymathy just because more attributes means more survivability. I might remove my points from this at some point to just try to get more pure damage, but we'll see. All in all, this is a very high damage build focused primarily on how do we convert pure attack speed into pure damage. That's about it. Now, when you're leveling, what do you want to do when you're leveling? What do you want to do when you're gearing, actually? No, let's talk about gearing first, then we'll move to leveling at the end of this video, because that's probably not why you guys are here. For gearing purposes here, on hits, we have such massive attack speed and we gain so much of our damage. The primary way to get more and more and more damage is to focus on getting as much on hit damage as you can. You can see with this ring here, we have fire and lightning on hit. On this ring, we have massive fire on hit. On my gloves, I have massive fire and some lightning on hit. These on hits are quite powerful. My weapon itself is just a pretty typical weapon. It's a pretty good weapon. I think this one was 4 divs. So this isn't like some cheap throwaway weapon, but this isn't some omega expensive weapon. You could probably clear most content with a 1 to 2 div weapon. This one was actually only about a 20% damage boost over my previous Giga weapon. That's because I had 100% bonus weapon elemental damage on it. If you can find a pretty good weapon with weapon elemental damage, that 100% weapon elemental damage will generally overwhelm a slight to mid-tier physical DPS lead. Now, of course, your physical damage does become fire damage here, so the more physical damage your weapon has, the better, but a lot of people will undervalue if you go to trades or things like that. If a weapon has 100% bonus weapon elemental damage on it, that will generally be about a 20 to 30% damage boost to your build. So that's just one thing to keep in mind. And then other than that, you just got to get that 35% movement speed on your boots. Try to obviously get resistance capped. Try to get as much chaos resist as you can. HP is obviously also good, but you know, for the most part, you can rely on sorcery ward, evasion, and just running around to stay alive during maps. Do mind, a lot of corpse explosions are physical, not elemental damage. Although catalysis will convert some of that into elemental, it will still be enough to kill you. Do not expect this build to be immortal. It is not, in fact, a energy shield build. Now, of course, last up here, while we are leveling, if you are leveling, you'll notice I did a lot of traveling over here. What did I do while traveling? So you will want to refund some of your points, but one thing you can do to kind of build up in these nodes before putting a lot of them into traveling over to acceleration is just go down here, grab blurred motion. You can eventually refund that. Grab all these little attack speed nodes here and here. These are good things to kind of put your points into for now. Eventually you can refund them all at once, and then that allows you, instead of spending like 10 levels just traveling, you put your points in attack speed, then you refund them later, and that allows you to reach catalysis. Catalysis is, or sorry, acceleration. Acceleration is one of the most powerful notables in the entire game. You will notice a very, very, very large power spike due to this. Okay. And then, of course, just I would really recommend this because this build kind of lacks percent damage. So Overwhelm is one of the primary sources of our percent damage. And, of course, all these little 12% damage nodes certainly are pretty good. You could probably get away without Curved Weapon or Colossal Weapon if you're coming down to it. They're not bad. They're not great. I could probably get rid of Curved Weapon, but we'll see how that goes. That's about it for this entire build. The damage pen here, the fire pen here and here, and then of course the fire pen on your oil grenade. That's 26 from your oil grenade, then 21 from your talents. That is 47% fire penetration. That's going to be enough for most bosses, and you will shred through pretty much every boss until the hyper mega late game. I don't think any of you guys are trying to do a +4 arbiter with this build. If you are, There are some ways to continue to scale it, but I would consider them unethical and probably going to get nerfed in the patch next week. Hopefully they do end up buffing this, but as for right now, we have a very large elemental shield. So long as we're not hit, this allows us to survive things like the dropping meteors, stuff like that. We can move around really quickly. We slow enemies. We can set up kill zones to keep people away from us. I would say of all the off-meta builds, this is probably the most fun one I've done by far. So there you go. Thank you all for watching, and thank you everybody. One last little thing here. I just want to make sure I went over every little detail. Glacial Bolt I'm not using. I experimented a little with it. We're not using that. As for emergency reload, we of course have Ingenuity to give it faster cooldown. We have Premeditation to give it more damage when we reload our main weapon, and we have Inspiration to just give it a little bit of cost reduction. On Overwhelming Presence, we're just using Cannibalism and Vitality. These are very, 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 very good for keeping us alive. You can put +1 skill level of fire. This is called a Lightning, Cold, and Fire ability. You can put +1 skill level those support gems in here. It will reduce its cooldown by 0.1 each. You could technically get it down to 7.8. I didn't even bother, but it's just one thing. As for crossbow shot, it doesn't really matter what you're doing with crossbow shot. You're never really going to use it. What are you going to do for mana? What I would recommend you do for mana is spam mana potion. That's about it. What I did is I went ahead and got a mana potion with reduced charges per use. This lets it hold the most charges inside of it because it reduces the amount of charges per use. So instead of a normal potion having 7.5 inside of it, I actually have 12 inside of it. These 32% reduced charges give me about 40% more charges to use during a boss fight. I never fixed my mana, ever. I didn't need to. Every time I ran out of mana, I just pressed a potion. So there you go. That's the build, everyone. It's a really fun build. I hope you guys will enjoy it. It actually is a lot of fun for me. So thank you all. Thank you, everybody. And have a great rest of your day.